He paid his bill before he died, not metaphorically, literally. He left a note on the nightstand. 2 words. For the room. And beneath it, enough cash to cover the nights he wouldn't be using. The detective who worked the scene later said he'd investigated dozens of suicides, but he'd never seen one where the person made sure their bill was paid. That detail stuck with him. It should stick with us too. Because this case isn't really about how he died. It's about who he was. And why, even now, we still don't fully know. Before we get into what happened, 2 things about this case don't behave the way you'd expect. First, he was eventually identified. In 2018, after nearly 17 years, a nonprofit organization confirmed who he was. His family was notified. Second, his name has never been made public. His family asked for privacy, and that request has been honored ever since. So we know who he was, and we don't. That tension sits at the center of everything, and it starts with a name that was never his. September 14th, 2001. 3 days after the 9/11 attacks, the entire country was still in a state of shock. News coverage was wall-to-wall. Airports were closed. In Amanda Park, Washington, a small town on the Olympic Peninsula, surrounded by forest, close to the Pacific coast, a man arrived by bus. He walked into the Lake Canal Inn. He filled out a registration form. Name, Lyle Stevik. Address, 1019 South Progress Avenue, Meridian, Idaho. He paid cash. The address turned out to belong to a Best Western hotel in Idaho. No one there recognized his photo. The name Lyle Stevik. Investigators eventually traced it to a character in a 1987 Joyce Carol Oates novel called You Must Remember This. The character's name was Lyle Stevik. In the novel, the character considers ending his life. The clerk noted that he might be Canadian. He had what sounded like a slight accent. He was tall, dark hair, green eyes. He was, she remembered, very thin. And that last detail would turn out to matter more than anyone initially realized. He checked in for 1 night, then extended his stay. Over the next 2 days, staff saw him walking along the highway near the motel, back and forth. No particular destination, just walking. At some point, he complained about noise from a nearby trailer park and asked to move to a different room. The request was routine. Staff didn't think much of it. He barely ate. He had almost no luggage. What he did have, his clothing, was noticeably too large for his frame. Forensic analysis later estimated he had lost roughly 18 kilograms of body weight in the period before his death. The cause of that weight loss was never established. Think about what those 3 days looked like from the outside. A man alone, in an unfamiliar place, walking a highway in the Pacific Northwest, saying almost nothing to anyone. We don't know what he was thinking. We don't know if he was certain or if he hesitated, or if something in those 3 days almost changed his mind. On the evening of September 16th, he didn't come out. The next morning, when he hadn't checked out, a housekeeper opened the door. He had taken his own life. He had placed pillows against the wall, a detail that told investigators he had thought carefully about what he was doing. On the nightstand, a note. For the room, and the cash to cover it. The Grays Harbor County coroner at the time was a former detective named Lane Humans. He described the scene as unlike anything he'd encountered in a career full of difficult cases. What stayed with him wasn't the method. It was the consideration, the bill, the note, the pillows. Someone had thought carefully about what they were doing, and about the people who would have to deal with what came after. Fingerprints were taken, DNA collected, dental records documented. Nothing matched any database. Lyle Stevik, as a name, did not exist in any census, phone directory, electoral roll, or search engine. And for the next 17 years, neither did he. Law enforcement submitted his profile repeatedly to the FBI, to Interpol, to NAMUS, the National Database for Unidentified Remains. Each time, no match. In 2007, he was listed as Profile of the Month by a public service initiative focused on unidentified Native Americans because investigators were still uncertain about his ethnicity. Meanwhile, online, something else was happening. A community had formed around his case on Reddit. Not law enforcement, not journalists. Ordinary people who had read about the case and couldn't let it go. They built timelines. They cross-referenced details. They discussed the alias, the novel, the weight loss, the note. And eventually, they decided to do something about it. They raised money to pay for a DNA analysis. Then they handed it to a nonprofit that knew what to do with it. The DNA Doe Project is a nonprofit organization founded by two genetic genealogists, Margaret Press and Colleen Fitzpatrick. In January 2018, they received a DNA sample from the Grays Harbor County coroner. They uploaded the profile to GED Match, a public genealogy database, and began building a family tree from distant relatives. Over the following months, approximately 20 volunteers worked hundreds of hours on the case. They found matches 2 to 3 generations removed in New Mexico, Idaho, Utah, Colorado. They traced the family to Alameda County, California. On May 1, 2018, they submitted a confirmed candidate to law enforcement. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. His family had kept a set of his fingerprints, taken when he was a child, through a school identification program. Those childhood prints matched the post-mortem prints from 2001. On May 8, 2018, the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office announced the identification. He was 25 years old when he died. He had lived in California. His family had believed he was alive. Estranged, but alive. They had never filed a missing person report because they thought he had simply chosen not to be in contact. They had been living with that assumption for 17 years. And then they found out what had actually happened. His family made one request, that his name not be released. The sheriff's office honored it. The DNA Doe Project honored it. Every journalist who has covered the case since 2018 has honored it. And so, publicly, he is still Lyle Stevik. This creates a situation without many precedents. A man who became a public mystery, whose case generated 17 years of global interest, whose identification was crowdfunded by strangers who cared about giving him his name back, and who, by his own family's request, still doesn't have one. Not publicly. There is no clean way to resolve that tension. The family's grief is real. Their right to privacy is real. And the strangeness of the situation is also real. He chose a name from a novel about a person who no longer wanted to live. He left 2 words behind. He paid the bill. And the name he chose is still the only one the world is allowed to know. Some questions were answered in 2018. Who he was, answered privately. Whether he had a family who missed him, answered in the hardest possible way. But some questions weren't. Why Amanda Park, a remote town on the Olympic Peninsula, hundreds of miles from where he lived? He arrived by bus. The route has never been part of the public record. Why that alias? He chose the name deliberately. What it meant to him, whether it was a message, a private reference, or simply the first name that came to mind, is unknown. And the weight loss, 18 kilograms, whatever was happening to him in the months before September 2001. That story has never been told. What we're left with is this: a man who planned carefully, who considered the people who would find him, who paid what he owed, and who chose, for whatever reason, to leave nothing behind that would tell us why.